In this section, I wanted to cover what I believe is one of the most important things when it comes to creating any freelance business, regardless of whatever vertical you're working within, and that is how you can master the art of cold outreach. The first thing I want to do is just cover the importance of cold outreach in general. When it comes to setting up and managing your own freelance bubble business, you should always strive to be good at bubble, but at the same time exceptional at sales. Cold outreach is more of a science than an art, which is awesome if you're used to being a no-coder, because you can really start to think about the logic behind cold outreach itself. And now what I mean by cold outreach being a science is that it is purely a numbers game. And if you were to really break it down, this is the science behind it. So if you were to think of cold outreach like a funnel, which essentially it is, at the top, you need to be able to identify how much potential opportunity you're pouring into that funnel. Sales is purely a numbers game, and you can tweak it to work in your favor based on whatever your input is going to be. But of course, it's not all just about the input of how many people you send emails to. Of course, there needs to be some sort of level of quality that you maintain throughout that process. So the next thing I want to cover is how we can craft the perfect cold email. The reality with cold outreach is that although it is cold, we need to still take the necessary time to create a warm introduction. And of course, what do I mean by that? I want someone to essentially receive our cold email, and by the end of them reading that email, I want to have already created some sort of relationship with that person, or shown them that I'm genuinely here to care about them and help them reach their objectives. So the first thing you'll need to do is your research. I can't stress this enough. So what do I mean by doing your research? When it comes to creating a cold email, our objective isn't to tell the client about how good we are and how we're going to essentially profit from whatever we're selling to them. Instead, what I want to do is take the time to understand the client themselves. So I want to understand their needs, their goals, their objectives, as well as any potential challenges they have in their lives. And what I really want to do is essentially just help them reach their end goal in life, which is a nice segue to the next point on my list, which will allow us to identify any potential roadblocks this client will have in getting to their goal. So is there anything currently stopping the client from reaching their goal that you can help them achieve? Because if you can alleviate any key pain points in their life, it'd almost be a no-brainer for them to work with you. And that also leads to my next point, which is understanding where the client is within their journey. So depending on where they are within their overall journey, it will definitely influence the amount of value you can add to them throughout any given cycle. And finally, the last thing I just wanted to point out when it comes to doing your research is just trying to identify who the person you're going to sell to will report to themselves. So it's really important to understand where the person you're pitching to sits within the overall, I guess you could say, org chart when it comes to the decision-making process. Because at the end of the day, that person's manager or the person that they're reporting to is the actual person who's going to make the purchasing decision. So they could either make or break a freelance project. When it comes to the actual initial outreach, so when you're crafting the email, about 80% of the time will actually be spent on this research component, whereas 20% will be spent actually crafting the email. So you can really start to see how important this stage of the whole cold outreach process is. When you're structuring your emails, don't be too formal at the beginning, and also likewise at the end. You don't need to take yourself so seriously and at the end say, kind regards, or I hope this finds you well. This really does add little value to the actual email itself. And especially when it comes to drafting a cold email, every single word is going to count. And so you don't want to have to fill it with text that's not related to the actual value you can add as a freelancer to someone's business. So again, just to reiterate, don't be too formal, be more human. Which leads me to my next point, which is that you should also try and eliminate small talk. So it's best off just getting straight to the point and finding that out right now. And now, while I encourage everyone to be direct, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be personable. I think there'll be a fine balance between the two that you'll need to embed within your email. But in the beginning, when it comes to your first cold outreach email, your main objective is to clearly communicate what amount of value you can add to this person's life, so anything else should be completely irrelevant. Which is the perfect segue for my next point that I want to cover, which is making the email about the person you're actually messaging. Within the first initial email, you need to make this as much about the potential client as possible and as little about you at the same time. By the end of the first cold email that you've sent, you want the potential lead or client to be thinking, wow, this person really is going to add value to my life. And so a great way you can start doing this within the actual email is by pointing out something personal that you've taken the time to research about their business or their work. Most people who are no-code developers love to talk about features and not specifically outcomes. They truly at this point only care about the overall outcome you can give them. And that's going to be the point of difference that will help them determine if they want to work with you or not. Now, when you're talking about your solution, you truly only have a limited amount of someone's attention before they tune out and just filter this as spam within their mind. And so what you need to do is be as succinct as possible. You're not going to have time to go into every single detail about your vision or, as I mentioned, the product features. But if you can share enough detail and insight about how your potential solution could help this person reach their outcome, it's going to encourage them to actually respond to your email so that way they can learn more. And that is exactly the goal of why you're sending this first cold email. It is, of course, so that way you can continually qualify this lead and start building an actual relationship with them. Now, another essential thing when you're talking about your solution is to make sure you actually add credibility as well. And of course, with credibility comes trust. And a great way to build trust when you're initially sending a cold email as a bubble freelancer is by showing someone tangible examples of the previous work that you've done in the past. Finally, the last thing you'll need to include within any cold email is just a real clear call to action. Of course, like anything in life, if you don't ask for it, you will never receive it. Which is why it's more important than ever to include a call to action within any cold email that you send. And look, a call to action can be one of many things. But to be honest, when it comes to sending your first initial cold email, your call to action should be as simple as possible. Now, one last thing I want to touch base on when it comes to the topic of having a call to action is that you should only have one CTA within your overall email. The last thing you want to do is overwhelm someone with a lot of different options and almost give them like decision paralysis. You just want to make the decision for them to take action to truly be as simple as it possibly can. Whenever I create content in the written form, I like to follow this process called AIDA. Now, AIDA is just an acronym which breaks down the process in which you should structure any copywriting content that you create. And this framework is broken into 4 different steps. There's attention, interest, decision, and action. And if you were to break these down into the process of creating a cold email, at the beginning when it comes to attention, you want to use a hook to get the user's attention so that way they don't just close your email and continue on with their day. You of course want them to read on to the next line within your email where you can start talking about the actual meat of the proposal that you want to send to this person, which is where you can then address the interest section of this framework. So after you get someone's attention, you want to maintain their interest. And this is where you can start talking about their problem. So this shows that you can actually relate to this person. And if you're talking about a problem that this user is facing in their life, they're going to be interested because they know that this is something that they actually need to solve. Which, following on from that, is the perfect time to then add in the decision. Now, the decision is where you introduce your solution. So after you've got someone's interest and you've made them realize that they have a problem that they need to solve, by introducing your solution, you can start to actually help them make the decision to act on that problem, which then leads you to your next point, which is where you can finally take action. So this is where you add your call to action into the email, so that way you can tell this person exactly how they need to proceed if they ever want to solve that problem in their life.